So we're 20 days away from the midterm elections, and Matt, I know you have been working very, very hard with your colleagues at DHS, so I'll put you on the spot right away.
Sure.
How confident are you in the measures that you have taken, and how will they protect this election coming up?
Sure. Thank you for the question. Thank you for having me here. I'm extremely confident in where we are in our relationships and supporting those state and local election officials that run elections, right? Those 10,000 jurisdictions. We have relationships with all 50 states. We're actively sharing information, being proactive in responding to information that they share with us to ensure that they have what they need to protect their systems and respond, right? It's not just about the protection, but that ability to detect and recover and building resilience in the process. And the progress we have made since 2016 leading into this election is huge across not just the election officials, but working with the private sector to ensure that information is being shared, services are being provided, and we're managing those risks appropriately. So I'm proud of where we are as an election official, as someone that grew up running elections, constantly asking myself, what more can we be doing? What else could go wrong, and how do we prepare for it? Just like all of the election officials across this country are doing day in and day out right now, as their ballots are being cast right now.
So, Robby, let's go a little bit beyond 2018. What more do you think needs to happen? Is it more funding? Is it more legislation on the federal level? Is it more outreach from vendors? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I want to underscore what Matt said, and Matt and I have been working closely together. Mitt Romney's former campaign manager and I set up a bipartisan project at the Belfer Center at Harvard focused on campaign and election security, because actually both of our campaigns had cyber intrusions by foreign countries, and that sort of brought us together. And I want to underscore what Matt said. We are so much farther ahead than we were. Everyone was surprised by what happened in 2016. And I think just the level of understanding, the level of commitment, and the progress that's been made is huge. But we have a long way to go. I think there are three things that need to happen. First is Congress has got to provide more resources for this problem. There's a lot of different legislation out there. I would say let's worry less about mandating a bunch of stuff, but just providing the resources and setting some broad goals. I think the second piece is I think we're spending too much time focusing on Congress in Washington, D.C., and not enough time focusing on state legislatures. Our elections are run by states. They are governed by state laws, and many of the laws that are in place right now and procedures do not lend themselves to security. In some states, we have 8,000 election jurisdictions in our country. You have some states where counties or even towns are individually managing this process. They're not equipped to make the right security choices. At some point, we have to. Some states have to empower their election office to impose certain security standards. And that's on state legislatures. And the last thing I would just say is, I get a question all the time when talking about this. Is the process secure or not secure? And I think everybody here in this room would understand that's nothing's ever completely secure. We've got to focus more on resilience. Matt mentioned that. And so to me, the question is not, will the system be breached at some point? Absolutely it will. The question is, do we have good systems in place such that every vote that is cast is then eventually counted properly? And I don't think we're talking enough about that.
So let's talk about that state legislature piece. Matt, I'm wondering, with the conversations that you're having at DHS, you're obviously going out to these states and localities that are dealing with these elections systems, but I would imagine that there might be some pushback because there is always that states' rights process to that. So how do you get that message across when you're part of the federal government, but there are always going to be people that say on the state level that, look, this is our thing and we're going to do it the way that we want to do it?
Sure. I mean, I've found typically it's really useful to come in and say, we're here from the federal government and we're here to help states react very well to that. No, in our experience, and certainly building since 2016, it's about building those relationships, but it's not just, hey, having pleasant conversations. It's what value are you bringing? How are you helping support, and how are you helping us manage these systems? And election officials, as folks in this room know, are traditionally under-resourced, under-supported, and so what resources do we bring to bear to help them manage the risks to the systems? And then we have a very close relationship with the National Conference of State Legislators. I have been out at their conferences regularly, talking to them about the challenges that election officials face. And I think Robby is absolutely spot on as we look at county commissioner levels, National Conference of State Legislatures, educating, sharing information about what is the environment that elections are run in, what more can be done, and how do we resource not just money, but how do we get IT expertise and support out to those county officials in the field that are working so hard to protect these elections. The other thing I'll add on that is bringing folks like the Belfer Center in and other resources. I mean, one of the really positive outcomes of 2016 is the amount of engagement from folks that we've never had in the elections community before, like Harvard Belfer Center. You know, almost every state engaged with Belfer, worked on the tabletop exercise, took it back to their home jurisdiction and worked with their counties. And so the more we can continue to work with academia, the private sector, to engage election officials and educate not just the election officials, but the state legislators, county commissioners, and others, I think the better off we're going to be as we build towards 2020.
So, Robby, you talked about the need for more resources. Where would you like to see that money spent? Is it in updating election equipment? Is it in better training? Is it working with the private cybersecurity companies? Is it all three?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, like I said, I think we need to set some broad goals. So one broad goal to me would be that it's easy to audit an election, and that if your vote is cast, that is kept somewhere, so that if the system is corrupted at some point and your vote is misreported in that system, we can go back and get the accurate vote. So some of that is simply training and orientation on different auditing techniques. But, you know, for example, OptiScan equipment that can scan those paper ballots, you could post those online if you wanted. People could actually go, you know, the citizens could go look at these ballots. The second piece that I think is really critical is just getting all of the different parts of the system up to date. So we focus a lot on machines, and there are still machines without a paper trail, and that's a problem, and that's largely a financial issue. But we forget, you know, there's online voter registration, which I think is great, but is incredibly vulnerable. There's the e-poll books that you use to sign in at the polling place. There's the system to report those election results. And I'm like, you know, it's way more complicated than I'm letting on there. All these pieces need to be brought up to snuff. But the other thing I would just say on this is I do think we need to invest more in research, because we are living today, I don't know if Matt agrees with this, we are living today with the Help America Vote Act, some of the fallout from that. After the 2000 election, there was a rush to buy machines, and I don't know that we thought carefully enough about what do we really need and what's the most secure thing. And so I think investing more in research to help guide these decision makers in what machinery they purchase is really important, what systems they purchase.
I mean, I completely agree. I mean, if you look back, I was actually just having this conversation at the help, we had the funds, which I think was an incredible investment from Congress, but we didn't have the certification regime in place, the standards, and the money had to be spent. And so I think that's one of the huge lessons learned, is this need not just for, you know, addressing and dumping money now, but an ongoing investment to secure what is critical infrastructure, our election systems, and that need to recognize that the election officials need to lay out what do we need on an ongoing basis, not just what do we need now to Band-Aid, but going forward, lay out exactly what their expectations are to manage risk and continue to improve the resilience of the process. And Robby hit it spot on. Secretary Nielsen's been clear. You know, by 2020, the goal really should be to get to 100% auditability for these systems.
So you hit on it a little bit there, the resilience part. Chris Krebs said this morning that, look, when election day comes, something's going to break. Something is going to break along the way. So you're going to need to have that resiliency baked in. And I'm wondering whether each of you have seen good examples of that resiliency being baked in, or if you haven't, where do you think the gaps are in order to make sure that in 2020, 2024, and beyond, that the election systems are resilient?
Yeah, absolutely. Election officials, and hopefully I'm not contradicting Chris. That would be a fun story back at the office. But election officials are natural risk managers. Chris is exactly right. He talks about it all the time, that you know, as we look at things like provisional ballots and the ability to ensure a voter is able to get their ballot and cast a ballot on election day and have it counted as cast, right? And so building in that resilience, having those backup procedures. Election officials are natural risk managers. They spend a lot of time dealing with what could go wrong. A really good example, a township in New Hampshire who I worked with regularly is in the fallout zone for a nuclear power plant. And he had down to the step-by-step, if there was nuclear meltdown on election day, how he would respond, keep the election running, and keep himself safe. Like that's the level of detail and thought. And exercises like what Belfer did and the tabletop exercise we did with 44 states and DC and local officials really helped to bring that home, the level of planning and preparation that they have. And so continuing to address how do we keep the process going, maintaining integrity. It may get messy, right? It may not be exactly how you want it, but ensuring folks are enfranchised, able to cast their ballot and have confidence in that.
Just really quickly, one of the projects that we've done at the Belfer Center is to create not just technical playbooks on how to secure the election system, but also communications playbooks so that secretaries of state can think through these contingencies ahead of time and be able to better communicate with the public about what's going on. I have to give credit to Chris Krebs. We had a meeting back in 2017 with a bunch of election officials to start a conversation about what our project could do to help. There was deep frustration that they didn't have access to intelligence from DHS and the IC in general, and today that's totally changed. So I think now the states, because of the work that Matt's been doing and DHS has been doing, they have more information, and I think they're more empowered to talk with the public. But again, this is where I think the dialogue has to change. It has to be okay for secretaries to say, something's going to go wrong in my state, but here's all the things I've done to make sure that when that thing goes wrong, your vote is still counted. The analogy I always use is banks. Banks get hacked all the time. None of us walk around worrying, well, is my money going to disappear? And it's got to be the same with your vote. Your vote's recorded somewhere, and that recording, you can go back to it later. Easy way to do that is a paper ballot, but that's not the only way.
So let's talk about how the vendors fit into this, because Robby, you were talking about the voter registration systems and the DRE machines, and there's a wide range of technology here. So obviously they need to be brought to the table. How has the conversation changed there, and what more can vendors do to sort of come to the table and say, okay, we're in on making things more resilient and making this work better?
Yeah, a fantastic question. The private sector is a vital part of elections. You have everything, as Robby said, voter registration databases, e-poll books, ballot-on-demand printers, and they're at the table working with us through our Sector Coordinating Council right now. So we have the Sector Coordinating Council having robust discussions with them around risk management and steps moving forward to provide and share information with the private sector as they are looking at what I think is a very real buying cycle coming up across the elections. Election officials are looking to upgrade. Election officials are looking to improve their technology. And so we've seen the private sector very engaged, wanting to address the issues, manage the risks, and really embrace the conversation around this. And so I look forward to, as we get through November, heading towards 2020, that conversation and real progress being made with our private sector partners on that.
Really quick, I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think funding research that can hold vendors accountable for meeting high standards, good testing, investing in testing. The other thing I'd say, I think a challenge for vendors coming down the line is supply chain. There's a lot of worry right now about where things are manufactured, and I think when we want things at the DoD to be manufactured in America, I think at a certain point we got to have our election machinery produced here in the United States in a secure environment.
The only plug, I know we're sure, the EAC's new standards, the VVSG 2.0, and moving those and using those, I think are a really important step. And the vendors and academia and everyone else has been engaged on that. So I would love to see that progress forward and the information that's out there publicly to be used as we look at new systems.
Gentlemen, appreciate your insights. Thanks for speaking with us on this.
No, appreciate it.